If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Inside my online program, Fitness Mama, I just love helping support women to care for their bodies during pregnancy, prepare their bodies for birth, and support their after-birth recovery, helping them feel confident and strong inside out during this important stage of their lives. In this podcast, join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth, and postnatal recovery, helping you through every step of the journey. It is absolutely possible to feel amazing and confident in our bodies during this motherhood journey, and I want that for you. Come and say hi to me on Instagram at @fitnessmama, and let's dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome back to the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. Okay, so today's episode, it's not for everyone, but it will be so helpful and I trust it will be useful if you have a child who you think has a developmental delay or a developmental disability, or if you know a family that's going through this at the moment in terms of navigating the healthcare system with their child, then flick them this episode because I have a chat to Hayley, who is the heart behind Alee Disability Support Services. And in today's episode, she helps to bring a deeper understanding of support for parents of children with a disability. So Hayley, she also not only works in this area, but she has a lived experience too. Her youngest daughter, Pippa, was born with, and I might be saying this incorrectly, but Wiedemann-Steiner syndrome. It's a rare genetic condition. And as a result, Hayley has been navigating the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So this is mostly, I think, will be helpful if you live in Australia with the NDIS. If you don't live in Australia but you have got a child with a developmental delay, I'm sure you'll get great value from listening to Hayley's discussion today. Hayley not only describes, navigating a system with their youngest child, they've got 3 children, but she also life did become more complicated when in 2021 she was diagnosed with cervical cancer. So she was navigating being in hospital, like her daughter just had surgery for a feeding tube, and then she was navigating having surgery herself and facing the treatment required for her cancer. So this episode, it's made me realize how ignorant I am when it comes to navigating NDIS. It's a huge thing out there. And one thing I gathered from this conversation is the power of advocacy, because it's such a big, like this monolith situation where if you've got a child with developmental delay, not only are you navigating just normal parenthood dramas of bringing up your children, but you're also trying to navigate this, I don't even know what to call it, but NDIS, it's huge. So to be able to, understand the system a little bit more helps you to, without, for want of a better word, play the system a bit better. And I think this is where the power of advocacy is so important. So if you've got a child with a developmental delay or a developmental disability, or if you know family that's going through this, as I said at the start, definitely send them this episode because I trust you're going to get a lot of value listening to Hayley's story today. And this chat today, it's partly from, it's interesting because Hayley puts on a parenting hat and describes how it was with the whole diagnosis with her youngest daughter, but she also talks to us from, an expert in this support facilitator role. So, yeah, fantastic episode. It won't be for everyone, but I know that it's a topic that is ever so needed for anyone that you know that's going through the situation. Okay, without further ado, let's get into this episode today with Hayley. Hayley, thank you so much for joining me on the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. We're just saying off air, this is going to be a really interesting topic where we're going to be crossing over into personal story from your behalf, but also, you're an expert in this field with NDIS services. So thank you for coming on today and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's start from the start. You help children with disability services. How did you get into this area?
Yeah, so I'm in the privileged position of working with families of children with disabilities. And so we are a support coordination company, which you can sort of think of us as your NDIS experts and friends, the little people on your shoulders. And so we help parents navigate the NDIS, also navigate mainstream services, find things in the community to connect to, and just sort of be there for them to navigate what has now become a beast of a system. And the reason I got into it was because of my personal experience. So I'm the mum of 3 girls, and my youngest daughter was born with a disability. And she is 5 now, which I just can't believe that we are this far down the line. And the first couple of years of her life were really, really hard. And throw in the unexpectedness of having a child born with a disability, because that's not spoken about. You don't see any prenatal vitamin ads, with a baby with a disability in them. It's just not even on anyone's, on the spectrum of thought. And so not only were we navigating life as, medical parents, disability parents, but then we had this thing called the NDIS, which I had been told was supposed to help us. But every time I asked for help, I was told I couldn't have it, or it was parental responsibility or something like that. And I just knew something had to change. It needed to be better for parents.
So we have a lot of listeners who are Australian, but we do also have listeners not in Australia. Could you please just briefly explain the NDIS for those who aren't perhaps living, or for those who don't know about it?
Yeah, so the NDIS is a world first initiative which has been piloted in Australia, and it's just hit 10 years old. So NDIS stands for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is implemented by the National Disability Insurance Agency, or the NDIA. Basically, in layman's terms, it's an initiative that provides financial assistance to help people with disabilities live a ordinary life, which funds supports for things that help to reduce the functional impact of a person's disability. So when we say functional impact, we're not talking about let's pay for a trip to Disneyland, and have an amazing life, but for that trip to Disneyland, a person might need support with mobility. They might need support with feeding. They might need support with, administering their own medication, showering, personal care. So it's really functional impacts of disability that the NDIS provides support around.
And before your youngest daughter was born with a disability, what was your involvement? What was your role then?
I spent 10 years working with victims of crime, actually, and sort of more so focusing on domestic and family violence. I coordinated a statewide program where we upgraded the home security of women leaving intimate partner violence. That was wonderful. Loved that. And doing things in the criminal justice system, like sitting with victims of crime as they gave their evidence, which quite often included children. After I had my first 2 kids, I sort of went, I'm done here. I'm a bit burnt out. This hits home a little differently. And so I moved on to working in the early childhood space from a community development perspective. And then I went and worked with volunteer organisations for a while. And I found that I just missed the people. I missed the complexity. And whilst I was doing meaningful work, it was very different. So I jumped back into sort of the mental health arena and started doing some counselling and working with families who had experienced mental health challenges, I suppose you'd say.
So are you a social worker what's your
No.
trade?
No, so I call myself a beauty school dropout. So I did 2.5 years of a direct entry midwifery degree, and I would go back and tell 21-year-old Hayley, just finish your undergrad, because I only had 6 months left. But I decided I didn't like the clinical environment of the hospital. Loved working with women, loved birthing babies, but it just wasn't for me. So I have a diploma of psychology and an advanced diploma in community sector management, and I'm still at uni in my spare time. And so basically it was after my experience, I had a health experience, I suppose, a dance with the big C, cervical cancer. And that was at a time where Pippa had just had her feeding tube placed. So she has a PEG. Sorry, listeners, I don't know the big long word for that. It's basically a tube into her tummy, which helps her, have food and water. She only needs it for water these days. But she had a terrible time and ended up in ICU and had terrible medical trauma from that. And so it was only myself and my husband who was able to feed her. Throw in a month later, I'm sitting in my gynecologist's office saying, you've got cervical cancer. You need to go 4 hours away from home for major surgery. And so I had a open cut radical hysterectomy, which the recovery was huge. And at the time, I was also told that I'd need 12 weeks of radio and chemotherapy. So I'm from a small country town, which is 4 hours away from the major hospital. And so that meant that I needed to relocate myself to Adelaide for 12 weeks. And so trying to do that, and I've still got 2 young kids at home as well. And, I look back now and I just go, wow, how did we get through? And one of my first instances was, go to NDIS, they'll help. This is what they're for. It's because of Pippa's disability that this is really, really tricky. Like, it's tricky anyway, but it was trickier than it had to be. And they just said, sorry, that's a child protection issue. If you can't care for your child, it's not our problem. And having spent 10 years working around the victim of crime space and child protection, I was like, absolutely not.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And so it was, long story short, we found a support coordinator.
Backtrack. You had been diagnosed with cancer. You had a child in and out of hospital with her issues with the PEG tube. You were then told, if you can't care for your child, it's a child protection issue.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I know. And now being in the sector, so happy to report almost 3 years down the track, full bill of health. But if you are overdue for a pap smear or cervical screening, get your butt to the doctors, ladies. Do not put it off. It was regular screening that saved my life. So I forgot where I was up to because I went on to my pap smear rant.
Yeah. Well, let's take a step back, because there's so many different interesting topics that we could talk about. Yeah. But one of the main reasons I got you on today, apart from having these amazing conversations, is to come back to the topic of what to do when you think your child has a developmental delay or a developmental disability. Gosh, I'm mixing up all my words. I've had too many coffees this morning. So this can be quite I'm assuming you've just had a baby. You're learning how to do all the things that goes with having a new baby, right? And then if there's something at the back of your mind thinking there's something not right, I can imagine that would be a potentially stressful period. So let's take a step right back and go to that question. Because I think I'd love to discuss the NDIS more and how they can help navigate, how they can be of support, hopefully, in navigating the situation. Who says dealing with toilet training accidents or sickness has to be a drag? Not anymore. Introducing Spewy Bed Mats, your ultimate sidekick for hassle-free nights and super quick cleanups. Picture this. No more wrestling with soggy sheets or remaking beds at 3 a.m. Spewy Bed Mats swoop in to save the day, soaking up to 2 litres of liquid. Plus, with their waterproof backing, you can kiss leaks goodbye and say hello to a better night's sleep. For peace of mind and stress-free nights, order now at spewy.com.au. That's spewy.com.au and use the code FITNEST15 to receive $15 off your first order.
Yeah, absolutely. So little people on the NDIS are a little bit different, and gaining access is a little bit different to people who are over the age of 9. I realise 9 is still very young, but as far as NDIA are concerned, early intervention is for children with a disability under 9. And then early childhood supports are for children who have developmental delays under 6. Now, that in itself is enough to confuse parents, because it's taken me 2 years in this sector to wrap my head around, well, a developmental delay versus a disability, like what the bloody hell are we talking about here? So basically what happens is the NDIS have an early intervention program, or an early childhood approach is what they call it. And so, it's basically, let's throw a heap of money and resources at this little person to help them build their skills in the best possible way that they can, and sometimes that means that they just need some short-term help. That's a great outcome. And it's something that is being reviewed by NDIS at the moment, because a lot of families jump onto the early childhood approach, and then there's this anxiety when their child's getting to about 6 and they're like, oh my God, we're going to lose our funding. We don't have a diagnosis. What's going to happen? Whereas rather than flipping that narrative, obviously if there's massive functional impacts, that's different. But a lot of what we see is that this little person has now, built the skills to allow them to live a, ordinary functional life. Yes, they need a little bit of support, but is NDIS the right space to be providing that? And can that be provided by the health system under your better access initiatives from your GP and the Medicare system, where you get 20 subsidised visits a year? So it does start to get into who's who in the zoo. So can
I recap everything you've just said to make sure I understand it? Okay.
Please do. I'm sorry. I go into support coordinator mode with this stuff.
No, that's all right. And I feel like I should know this. I did not realise that there was a difference here. So if your child has a developmental delay, this is classified as a different thing to a developmental disability. And I assume, how do you get diagnosed as a developmental delay versus a disability? Is this just when they haven't been able to put a label on whatever's going on?
Exactly. That's to put it really, really plainly, it is. It's, does the kid have a diagnosis? No. Then you'll generally see them under that global developmental delay banner. And that's...
Yeah, but what percentage? I would have thought most children would get a diagnosis if there's something going on.
No. So, and it's also worth noting, and I don't want to get too technical here. So, like I said, please rein me in if I go into support coordinator mode. So we have the developmental domains of children, which you would be well aware of. NDIS, they have it a little bit different. Okay. So they look at 4 main areas for children. So are they delayed in their self-care? In their self-care skills? Are they delayed in their receptive and expressive language, their cognitive development, and their motor development? Now, if you can provide evidence to the NDIS to demonstrate that your child is delayed in 2 of those areas and needs help for from, probably say, for example, a speechy and a physio, then it's really likely that they will obtain access to the NDIS early childhood approach. All right, because they need quite substantial support. That can happen at 12 months old. That can happen at 18 months old. You're not going to get, say, an autism diagnosis at 18 months old, if that is. And we see a lot of kids on the scheme with autism, and to have a private assessment for autism, you're looking at paying about $2,000, I think. And then the wait lists under the health system are exorbitant. We're talking 2 to 3 years for some people. So this is where it can get really messy, and there's, a lot of anxiety in parents around, my child's about to turn 6 and we've still got global development delay as their primary diagnosis. And when they contact their community partner for support, sometimes, I don't want to, poo-poo on community partners, because there's some amazing community partners out there, but sometimes they will receive responses like, well, they're 6 now, you're going to lose all your funding, see you later. And so this is where there's a lot of undue anxiety, because NDIS, it doesn't happen where a child turns 6 and they're pushed off the cliff. There is sort of a bit of a transition period. And if you can explain these functional impacts of disability and demonstrate, well, look, we're on the wait list, or look, we're waiting for genetics to come back. The delay to see a geneticist in the public system is up to 3 or 4 years in some states.
Really?
So it's massive. So this is where, there's a lot of varying factors. And so it's easy to give general advice, but I really do want to put the caveat on it for families, is that each individual is assessed on their individual merits. It is not a one-size-fits-all.
Okay, so let's say you've got a 2-year-old having some speech difficulties. You're going to speech therapy. You don't know if there's a diagnosis per se. Maybe they're going to occupational therapist for hand motor, all the rest.
Yeah.
And you're just continuing along with that with some funding through NDIS. At what stage do they say to you, hey, your child's approaching 6, you need to get a diagnosis? At what stage do you, if you're just, does everyone have a support coordinator who can talk them through the process?
No,
I'm so ignorant, aren't I?
No, they don't, unfortunately. So there's a lot of noise in the NDIS space at the minute about the role of support coordinators and community partners and things like that. What I just want to, I think, is really worth sharing with your audience is, they're listening to me going, community partner, who the bloody hell is a community partner? I thought we were talking about the NDIS. So basically, NDIS pay community organisations in the community to deliver this community partner role. What are they? They're basically the people on the ground who you as a participant or you as a mum go to for help for all things NDIS, okay? They're like the buffer. And I think that they have a really tricky role, because they've got us from the community going to them going, help, like our funding's about to run out, we need support. And then they try and feed that up to NDIA, and NDIA are saying, no, like you can't have it. And so they're really stuck in the middle. So I've got a lot of compassion for community partners. I think they have a really tricky role. What is the often misconception is that they are the NDIA, and they are not. And so we have families going to community partners asking for help, and sometimes not being provided with correct information around, we've got a lot of families who say, oh, I asked my community partner if I could buy a peanut ball, to help. You could probably do a physio explanation of a peanut ball. I'm just like, it's a ball and it helps kids roll on it and they have fun and it builds some muscles.
I love that explanation. Perfect.
Yeah, that's my parent explanation. And they'll go to the community partner and be told, no, that's parental responsibility. You can't use your funding for that. And then they'll come to a support coordinator and we'll say, well, what are your kids' goals? Is it flexible funding? Absolutely. It sounds really reasonable. You just need to be able to answer these questions. And so there's so much confusion. So in the early childhood space, NDIS pay community organisations that are child development specialists. All right. So your community partner has some form of tertiary qualification or experience in the early childhood space. They are supposed to be who parents go to for support around all things NDIS. If you have a 2-year-old, sort of very similar to your examples, they would be what we would consider, say, general streamed. All right. Yes, they need some help, but, you know, things are okay. You know, like housing's not an issue. You know, they're not involved with the justice system. They don't have huge, profound medical needs. So in that instance, the early childhood community partner would be deemed as the appropriate support for them, and parents wouldn't have support coordination funding.
Okay.
What we get when you do start to get support coordination funding included in plans is when you can demonstrate complexity. So that's, say, having multiple children with disabilities, having parents who are at risk of burnout, which is 99.9% of the families who walk through our door. And by providing evidence to the NDIA, because basically the NDIA can fund whatever you want as long as it meets the reasonable and necessary criteria in the legislation. And that's the falling down that a lot of people have, is they go, I want weekly occupational therapy for my child. And it's like, okay, that's fine. What evidence have you got to show that that's what they need? How is this frequency of therapy going to benefit them? What are their goals? What's the methods that this occupational therapist is using? And how is it going to benefit your little person in the long run? It's a very different conversation with the NDIA than we need this. Yeah.
And I can understand why we do need to have those conversations too, because if, you know, it's getting funded, right? So you just want to make sure that from a funding point of view that it's justified. And if you can justify it, no worries. The problem is when people don't know how to justify it, or they don't have the support to know how to justify it.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's the lack of consistency too. You know, we were just talking, one of my support coordinators this week. Last week, she had 2 plans come back, and there was an increase in $400,000 across those 2 plans in funding. Amazing, life-changing for these families. And then she's had 3 plans come back this week that are absolute rubbish. They are absolute rubbish, and we now need to go through those processes to, you know, for lack of a better word, appeal the process, appeal the funding. And it's so inconsistent. And, there's no straight answer.
You know what I feel support coordinators are like? They're like lawyers when you're navigating a legal system to get someone out of jail. you know, one lawyer might do a shitty job and the person goes to jail, and then the other one knows all the ins and outs, and their client gets off scot-free.
I know, that's a really great way to describe it. But also with that lawyer analogy, it depends on the judge. Now, if the judge has banged his or her car on the way into work, had a fight with their partner, and their kid has told them that they hate them in the morning, they're not coming to that bench in a sprightly way. Now, yes, they're impartial, supposed to be, but we're also dealing with humans here. So it honestly comes down to the NDIA delegate, because what one person will justify, another person won't. And that is the bane of support coordinators and families and participants' existence.
And anyone who's listening today, this is where advocation is so important. And if you know anyone, any families who are dealing with developmental delay or disability, then, you know, shoot them Hayley's details or shoot them this podcast episode, because it's all about advocation, getting advocation you need to get the outcomes that you need.
Yeah. And so if anyone does have any concerns, I would encourage them to go to your child and family health nurse. They do sort of, well, in South Australia and Victoria, I believe. So I'm pretty sure this is Australia-wide. The equivalent of your child and family health nurse. So these are the people that check on you after you've had your baby. They come and they weigh the baby and they make sure they're gaining weight and all that sort of stuff. If you've got, say, some feeding issues or complexities in the home environment, you'll sometimes have a child health nurse for longer. They are fantastic referral sources to the NDIS because they're going to pick up those developmental delays earlier on, and they should then refer you to your early childhood partner. So I would encourage everyone to either go onto the NDIS website, which is www.ndis.gov.au, and on their homepage there's an actual button that says for children younger than 9. That's then going to take you to all of the early childhood information and resources, and it's going to help you to find your early childhood community partner in your local area. They are the people that are going to help you. They do this. This is their bread and butter. And then if you are having trouble, then try and find a support coordinator or someone who can help you. But your early childhood community partner and your child and family health nurse, your paediatrician, those are sort of your first steps if you've got concerns.
Okay, and then just to clarify, when would someone get in touch with you, for example, or another NDIS support coordinator?
Yeah, so generally we don't come into the picture until after someone has got their plan, because support coordination has a specific line of funding in a little person's plan. However, that's not to say we've got a couple of clients who contract us privately. And so, you can pay for us privately like you pay for anyone else privately. And we can help gather information and documentation to, for families that are sort of struggling to meet access. Most of the time, the families are already engaged with, the local hospital speech department, dietitian, physio, all that sort of stuff. And they've got enough evidence to be able to meet that threshold of obtaining NDIS access in the early childhood approach. The one thing that I do think is worth noting, which is particularly I think relevant to your audience, is the NDIS see developmental concerns and developmental delays as different as well. Because it was already not clear, let's throw another spanner in the works. So I think though, if anyone listening to this, if you've tried to obtain access to NDIS and have been told that your little person sort of meets the threshold of a developmental concern and not a developmental delay, what that means is that they're acknowledging that, yes, they're definitely this little person is delayed, let's say, in their speech. However, there should be enough resources in the mainstream services to be able to support them. Technically, early childhood community partners are supposed to be able to provide up to 17 hours of support to little people that don't meet NDIS access. But their KPIs and workloads are just insane. And so you don't very often hear of this service being provided. But yeah, that's when you would be sort of told, sorry, yeah, we acknowledge, we're not saying that they don't have a fine motor delay or they don't have a speech delay, but everything else seems to be tracking along pretty nicely. So you don't meet the access requirements for NDIS.
Amazing. Can I ask you some? Yeah, it is confusing. My head's. It's so good to talk about because I think it's even good for people who perhaps someone that's going through all this and just understanding the complexity of it gives you a bit of insight as to what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Parenthood's hard enough. Navigating this system, just in having this conversation, I'm like, oh, I need to, have a breather.
Yeah. I know. And it's like, and we're just talking about, and I don't want to minimize the impact that having a child with fine motor delays and speech delays can have, but they're pretty they're the general streams. We haven't even gotten to children who have, who need equipment, who need nursing care, who need support workers, who need, all of these other things. This is literally allied health stuff. That's the easy support to get. But then when you've got burnt out, exhausted parents, which was my experience when because I first contacted NDIS before this cervical cancer stuff. Pippa was just gone too. And part of her genetic syndrome is she doesn't make the proteins like other kids do for her sleep. And so she has really crappy sleep. I had always put it down to the fact that she was on overnight feeds and had oxygen and all that sort of thing. And she's got pretty crappy sleep apnea as well. And I just went to my community partner and I said, help, I'm not coping. I am exhausted. This kid wakes up every 45 minutes and starts her day at 3 a.m. in the morning. I don't know what I need, but I need help. Sorry, that's parental responsibility. She's under 2. She's 2. It's not, not untypical for them to be waking and all this sort of thing. So again, now as a support coordinator, I know why I was unable to get the support that I needed, but I shouldn't have to be a support coordinator to know how to ask for help when I am exhausted. And that's something, I realize we're getting off topic, but parental responsibility, anyone who follows me, is my bugbear.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that. If you're a parent or someone who's a parent and they're getting burnt out, what can they do? What are some options?
So the immediate option is I would actually encourage them to contact the Carers Gateway. If there's an actual immediate risk to their sustainability of their ability to sustain care, contact the Carers Gateway. They are the unsung heroes in the carers world. They're able to provide packages and support for short term. So in the end, after my surgery, for instance, it was the Carers Gateway who provided funding for a support worker to help me at home for 6 weeks with Pippa, whilst my support coordinator dealt with the cluster F, I'll try not to swear, the cluster F of all of the NDIS stuff. So immediately I would encourage you to go to the Carers Gateway for some really, for some immediate support.
And I'm just Googling it. Googling. Is that carergateway.gov.au?
Yes. Yeah. So It's an Australia-wide, it's a national federal service, and then it will branch off into the state relevant branches as you contact. Okay. But they are, and even just for counselling, they offer free counselling, they offer peer support groups. They're bloody fabulous. Amazing. So if immediate support, I would go there. Then if you are a parent who, let's say, who wants in-home support, if you contact a community partner or the NDIS and ask for in-home support and you're met with sorry, NDIS doesn't provide support workers for young children, that's parental responsibility, call their bluff and go, that's absolute bollocks, absolute bollocks. But what the difference is and where the gap is and what, parents aren't often shown is it's okay, so let's use Pippa as an example because she's so much easier. Let's demonstrate that, yes, it's not unusual for a 2-year-old to wake up through the night, okay? But Pippa's was because of her disability. So I could then provide evidence to go, well, here's Wiedemann-Steiner. Here's the evidence that her protein, the stuff's not being made in her body. Here's the evidence of her sleep apnea and the fact that her airways close over, which is directly related to her disability. Here's the fact that she's on overnight feeds, which is directly related to her disability. And so that's the difference. So to anyone that goes to NDIS and says, I need to go to work and I need a support worker so I can go to work, that's not going to happen. All right. We need to sort of look at what is disability specific. Now, we have a few clients on our books who are really complex, and so the childcare environment is not a safe space for them. But we have had to provide profound and robust evidence to demonstrate to NDIA why childcare is not the right environment for them. unfortunately, it can't just be, I'm telling you I don't want to send my kid to childcare. It doesn't work like that. And I don't think it should either. And so, again, it comes back to my personal opinion, and I might get roasted, is I find NDIS to be pretty reasonable if you've got the evidence. And if you can't get the evidence, then maybe it's about looking and reflecting and going, well, if I can't demonstrate this, you know, where are the gaps? All right?
Totally.
My last little tidbit.
Yeah.
My last little tidbit for parental responsibility is, if you are told by anyone, sorry, that's parental responsibility, this is the support coordinator coming out in me, there is absolutely nothing in the NDIS legislation that demonstrates what is parental responsibility. Okay. So if you're asking for a certain support and they go, nope, sorry, that's parental responsibility, and you can push and go, well, can you show me where that defines that in the legislation? Because it doesn't exist. It's become an easy response, whereas then, you know, it comes down to the reasonable and necessary more so, how you demonstrate that.
Yeah, I totally get that.
I know. Sorry, guys. It's NDIS. It's like, look, I love it because I love being able to, I guess, simplify it for parents and make it more, you know, easy to digest. But it's true, you know, parenting is tricky. You know, I don't think I've met one mum in my life that's gone, this is so easy. You know, I've got this in the bag. And parenting children with disabilities, it has that added layer of NDIS and funding and all that. It's a whole other world.
Do you provide consulting in terms of just like one-off, let's have a one-off meeting where we can talk through all the services that you're getting, all your issues, you know, where your child's at, and
I would love to say yes. I would love to say yes. You know, where able, I do. We've grown. So Alee Disability has grown in a way I never imagined. And so it's not often that we have capacity for support coordination clients. So if I see someone come through and I'm like, right, they only need a 1 hour pick my brain session, I absolutely will try and do that. But what I've sort of started as a result of this is I've started to develop training videos, you know, and information videos for parents, because we just can't keep up with the demand. And so I figure a training video with me is better than nothing. That's sort of what I've got. Yeah.
Okay. Let's finish on a light note. You've been travelling around Australia in a caravan.
I have.
Tell us about that.
Well, having your morbidity questioned is really great for putting shit into perspective. Not that I recommend it, you know, but like I said, yeah, cancer's great for perspective. And hubby and I have always loved camping, being outdoors, being active. And it was a bit of just this pipe, you know, we're going to travel around Australia one day. And so when I had to go see the oncologist, so I seen the oncologist on a Friday and I was booked in for my hysterectomy the following day. So we had an afternoon to kill in Adelaide and we were like, right, we get through this, we are going to make the trip around Australia happen. And so we did. And so here we are. Pippa's now at a point where medically it's safe enough for her to be able to travel, whereas in the first couple of years of her life we just never would have been able to do it. And yeah, I just figure I'm going to keep my kids close while they still like me. It's like I'm going to wring the most out of them.
Are you homeschooling?
Dave, my husband's homeschooling because I'm working.
Yeah, you're working.
I got the easy job. Yeah,
so
I got the easy job.
How does he find that?
He's an amazing dad. He is just born to be a dad. Like he's just so good. You know, the girls and him have got a system. I don't even try to do any homeschool now.
So how do you, just logistically, how do you you're caravanning, you're all in a caravan, 5 of you, correct?
Yeah.
You're in a caravan, you're doing homeschooling, you're working from home. How do you do it? Cafes?
Dave's, I honestly know. So Dave will quite often take the girls to a playground and do their school at the playground. He's just, I have to actually give all the credit to him. He's just so accommodating, where it's, we'll talk and be like, right, I've got this meeting with the NDIA and I cannot be interrupted. And so it's like, he'll go take the kids.
Yeah. And if it's raining, you just all bunk in the caravan together or go to it?
Yeah. Look, if it's raining, we tend to follow the sun. So we haven't had too much of that. And also too, I guess it's the flexibility. I mean, my clients know that I travel and my kids have gotten really good, I must admit. And that's the beauty of traveling Australia, is they've got Australia as their backyard. So it's not unusual for me to be in the caravan and Dave and the kids to be outside at the beach climbing a mountain on a playground.
Unbelievable. Amazing.
Yeah.
And what are you using for Wi-Fi or internet?
Starlink. This is an unpaid promotion. Best thing ever. I don't know how people
I have no idea.
live their
I don't
lives.
know.
Oh,
I
really?
don't know anything about it.
That's showing I've been in the caravanning world too long. Most travellers understand what Starlink is. So it's created by Elon Musk, and I can get for those of you who know Australia, they might know where Fruitbat Falls is, which is right up the top. It's in Cape York, like right on the tip of Australia. And so we were sitting at Fruitbat Falls, and the caravan was there, and I was in the caravan working. Like, it's just living the dream.
Wow. Let's finish on that note.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Hayley.
Thank you.
I don't know whether I should be saying this on air, but I'm starting another podcast all about menopause. So that's why I didn't ask you much about your cancer diagnosis and your hysterectomy, because I want to have you on that podcast.
Oh, I would love to. I think, look, surgical menopause, I'm all for it. There's nothing out there on it. So there.
So stay tuned, ladies. This will be perfect for everyone listening in 10, 15, 5, 1 year. Who knows? But sooner than we think. It's on our doorstep, right?
Yeah, I know. You know what? I would say from a menopause perspective, as much as it's easy to say I'm 3 years down the track now, so starting to sort of level out. I'm glad that I won't have your typical menopause of being peri and you know what I mean? Like, it's done.
It's done. It's done and dusted.
It sucked for a really long time, but now I sort of feel like I'm sort of I got the good end of the bargain, kind of.
And Hayley, you're allowed to take the positives out of the cancer diagnosis. So absolutely leech the positives as much as you can. Yeah. So my waistline would beg to differ. But I'm glad that it's sort of, I know where I'm at. I know I won't have any ovaries going. Yeah.
They're just gone.
Thank you so much, Hayley. Appreciate the chat today in your caravan.
Thank you.
And we'll have you back on our new show very soon.
All right. Thank you.
And before I sign off, remember my team and I will be putting together the show notes for this episode with all the links that Hayley suggested, including how to connect with Hayley at fitnessmama.com/podcast. Have a fabulous day, everyone, and I look forward to you joining me next week for another episode of the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at Fitness Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer, materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. I'll see you soon.